And it was a really tough decision deciding my pick of the week this week because I think there's quite a few games that really could earn that title. But I think I'm going to give it to this one for a particular reason. And the reason is that this game may not be the most intricately designed game, but I think the design does look really solid. More than that, I think this is just going to be a really fun game, and I think anyone can play this, which makes it really ideal for a family setting or if you're playing with people who maybe aren't into board games quite as much as the rest of us. But this one's a semi-cooperative game where players are going to be trying to protect their village from a dragon, although I think this one would be more accurately described as a semi-competitive game because it is more competitive than it is cooperative, and I really do like how the semi-cooperative aspect comes into play because you're not just dealt a random card at the start of the game in order to be a trader. Instead, you have to make a conscious decision at a certain point in the game, and the first person that does that can then turn against everyone else, and everyone is aware of this, and you also get to ride the dragon. I told you it was fun. But players are all going to be playing as different characters with their own asymmetric abilities, and each player is also going to be starting with an ability card as well that usually does have multiple uses. The main board is going to be broken up into 3 different sections with the city on one side and the dragon on the other, and the dragon never moves from that position, although it can move side to side, and I'll come back to that in a second here. But the players are all going to be playing their characters in the center of the board, moving across these different spaces, trying to protect the city by building buildings, fighting against the dragon, and going on various quests. And now you might be asking yourself, how does the dragon even damage the village if it can't move from that position and it can only move side to side? And the answer to that is, of course, by breathing fire. Because the way that this works is that the main city has a bunch of walls set up in front of it, and as soon as all of those are knocked down, the players actually lose the game. The way that the dragon breathes fire in this game is by first preparing to breathe that fire by putting some marbles into a ready position, and then once the dragon attacks, you're going to be putting all those marbles into the top of the dragon so that the dragon spits them out, knocking anything in the marble's way. On a player's turn, they have a bunch of different actions they can choose from, but they can only pick one to play, and the first one is to move a number of movement points and then collect resources from any of the tiles adjacent to them. Each of these tiles will generate a different type of resource, and whenever you pick those up, you're going to be moving up the associated track on your own personal player board. Resources are important because you're going to be spending them in order to build all sorts of walls that you'll be able to place out on the board in order to block those marbles and defend the city. The nice thing about building walls is that you do gain a bonus for placing them, and you also gain a bonus when they are knocked down. Another action you'll probably want to perform at some point is to just pray to the gods for some help, because anytime you do that, you're going to be able to move this token around on the rondelle on your board, which can grant you with all sorts of benefits, mainly the ability cards that, like I said, can be used for multiple different purposes. But scattered across the board are a bunch of different quest tokens, and each of these are going to have a couple quests outlined on the bottom of them that will require some amount of resources in order to get some sort of benefit. And there's going to be an easy quest and a hard quest on each of these. And in order to complete that quest, all you got to do is move your character onto that token and then perform the quest action, which will allow you to look at that token and then complete it if you are able to do so. But the main reason you're probably going to want these tokens is because each one does have an icon of a certain type of rune on top of the token, so these are always visible, and you're going to need certain colors of runes in order to deal damage to the dragon. The dragon has multiple layers of armor that will require one or more runes to be spent in order to deal damage. This is where the next action becomes very important because you can actually use an action to peek at the bottom of any quest token out on the board. This means that you could look at quest tokens that are maybe a bit farther away from you so that as you're moving towards them to get the runes that you need, you can make sure that you have the resources that you need to fulfill that quest when you actually get to it. To actually use those runes to attack the dragon, you have to get your character all the way to the furthest end of the board so that you're adjacent to the dragon, and then you're going to be spending those runes destroying that one layer of armor. But like I said, this is a competitive game. There's only going to be one winner at the end, and all these different actions are different mechanisms for you to score victory points because you're going to be gaining points for completing those quests, damaging the dragon, building buildings, and blocking those fire marbles any way that you can. But the dragon is not going to make it easy for you because after all the players have had their turn, then the dragon is going to get a turn, and this is just resolved by drawing a card from the dragon deck and then resolving whichever effects is outlined on that card. This could allow the dragon to boost its defense by adding even more rune tokens to the dragon board, or instead it could cause the dragon to move left or right in order to target the nearest standing wall. You can also attack the village directly, and you're going to be tracking that on the separate track here. And every time the dragon does 5 points of damage this way, it's going to be instantly destroying one of those walls. Like I said before, the dragon can also prepare to attack, and the way that this works is that you're going to be moving marbles from the left-hand side of the board onto the right-hand side of the board into that ready position. And there are 2 sizes of marbles, with one being smaller and one being larger. And this brings me to the final action of the dragon, which is to breathe fire. And anytime that that happens, you're going to be taking all the marbles that are in the ready position and then dropping them into that dragon, smallest to largest, and then letting them fly into the village in order to see what kind of destruction it can do. It's going to be destroying any walls or buildings that it's able to push out of their space, but then if the marble makes it to the end of the board where the city is, it's also going to have the opportunity to stop rolling in one of the recessed spaces, essentially giving that dragon a special ability. This could allow it to perform any one of those actions for free, or even do something a little bit different. A really cool thing that the players can actually do to defend the city from the dragon is to strategically place their miniatures in a position that they think will help block those marbles, because if a marble hits a player, it's actually going to be gaining some victory points to that player because they managed to help keep that fire away from the city. And I gotta say, there's not many cooler things than deflecting fire. But not every player needs to be this heroic, because any one player is allowed to betray the village and join their forces with the dragon. In order to do this, you first need to gain enough victory points to move past one of these red sections on the scoreboard. And then at that point, you do have the decision to join forces with the dragon, and that's going to be giving you a hand of dragon cards and essentially allowing you to play on the dragon's turn. The way this works is that when it's the dragon's turn, instead of the dragon drawing a card randomly, you actually get to choose one from your hand, adding a strategic element, allowing you to decide which one you think will cause the most damage. Of course, you also get to ride on top of the dragon as well to indicate your control over it, and if you're able to destroy the city while being in control of the dragon, then you are the player that wins, regardless of the victory points that the other players were able to scramble together. And the reason that there's 3 different red spaces out on the board is because if you do decide to join the dragon, you're going to be getting more cards into your hand to choose from the further along you are across those red spaces. Really fun looking game here, and I'm definitely interested in this one myself, and if you think this one looks like a lot of fun as well, you can definitely go ahead and check it out, and I will have it linked in the description down below.